how I got introduced to you was actually from last month when I went over to the Rooster, and Ray Money was. I can't remember how I came across his account, but I think it was one of those situations where, because I live out here in Gastonia, and I follow some social media accounts with anything pertaining to Gastonia, just any upcoming events to be on the lookout for, and his post came through, I think, to some sort of like ad, something or whatever it was, that promoted the Roosters comedy night for Thursdays, every Thursday, every third Thursday of each month, I think is what it was.
Right.
Anyway, so when I saw that, I was happy to see that there was a comedy scene that was being developed for the Gastonia area, because I knew there's already one in Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I checked it out, we'll probably get to that later on, but once I went over there, I wasn't sure what to expect. I mean, I was hoping to get some good laughs, but I wasn't sure of the talent, because I'm not aware of any of the local comics in the area.
Yeah, right.
So with that being said, though, hearing Ray more or less handle the hosting duties, which I thought he was great at.
Yeah.
It really wasn't until when you came on where I felt like that you actually stole the show. Personally.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much.
No, I mean that too. And then I forgot the gentleman's name that came up after. He was great too. So everyone did a good job, I would say. But I thought you were the one that stuck out the most. And then once I saw, when I learned that everyone pretty much lives nearby, I was like, so there's still, so that I realized it was one of those things that reminded me that there's a strong set of comedians in the area that I'm not aware of, that this more or less opened up the floodgates for me, if you will. So as a result of that, that's why I want to reach out to you, because once I had saw your set that night, then I started looking into your background as well too, looking up your YouTube channel along with several other interviews you've done as well too. So I bring that up here because basically what I'm trying to start off is I've heard all the stories that you've shared before on more than one occasion, so I'm not going to ask you to repeat that again here because it's already been said, it's already been exhausted at this point from what I've heard before. But I figured that I could start off here with you on this here, because, I think in the email I mentioned before that because I've learned about your background, because you serve as a scout locator for the area in the state of North Carolina, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
And then with the way things are going right now when it comes to the comedy scene and then the film industry, especially here in North Carolina. And I've heard you actually talk about it not too long ago about how things have more or less changed along the way, how when you first got into it and then how you started working with the filming scout locations, how much of the time how much that has consumed your time, and then you kind of more or less was shifted over to commercial, which I still believe you're still doing now. So that's mainly more your bread and butter there. Gives you more time for you to be able to kind of travel around and do your stand-up.
Exactly, yeah.
So what I was curious about with you is because I'm not sure really in its entirety how the industry works here in North Carolina, apart from I know that there's a lot of work out in Wilmington, and which is like, I think at the time it was called the East Coast of Hollywood, if you will, which served that for for a long period of time. But I guess what I was wanted to start up with you is that I'm actually really curious about how you've noticed things have changed ever since, like, for example, we have Atlanta being more or less the main hotspot for a lot of productions. New Mexico has been kind of up and coming as well too, and then of course Louisiana kind of served that for a number of different places, and then of course we have Canada, parts of the country here and there. Now Montana's being kind of a big one. Texas is a huge one now as well because of Taylor Sheridan. So what kind of leads me to this question is because I was actually curious about, with the amount of locations that are opening up that are more or less kind of creating an incentive for the productions come out there. I'm not sure if you notice has that affected North Carolina, particularly Charlotte, where more work is going over there now. And are you guys just is there a little bit of less work as a result of the amount of places that are opening up, or is it more like it's based on whatever they need, and if we have what they need, we're here to serve them in that capacity? I hope that's not a convoluted question.
No, it's all right. Well, I mean, I'll just start off by saying I don't know what Montana, Texas. I don't know what their film incentive, their programs are.
Right.
It's always like follow the money, right? Like what affects the bottom line. I think that's always number one. Number two is the needs of whatever the project are,
right.
And that could be location driven. if they want, you know, a new city, if they need mountains, if they need both, and what locations have both. And I think, you know, for use Montana as an example, I think they've always had between, you know, from just that whole area from Utah, Montana, Nevada, all those places have a very niche sort of look. Therefore, they're gonna get that kind of work. I don't think we're competing with Montana for projects necessarily. I'd be a little surprised to find that out, just because our locations are going to be just a little bit different. But if it's an incentive thing, I know, I think there was it was years ago that Michigan actually had a really, really aggressive incentive program, and I think it was about 2 years worth of it, and people had moved there, and the local government there, I'd say local, the state government actually, I think, said this is crazy. It's we're giving away too much money for this. It's not really working out to be the financial windfall they thought it was going to be. So whoever set it up maybe was a little aggressive about it. I don't know the ins and outs to really have a real sort of comment or opinion on that, but I will say every time I hear that, I always kind of chuckle a little bit, because in North Carolina, we're 25 cents on the dollar, right? So every dollar that's spent on a production here, it has to reach a certain level. It's usually, I think, $250,000 once they spend that here. Every dollar they spend at that point, 25 cents goes back to the film production. Right. That means 75 cents of that stays here in North Carolina, whether it's to a crew member, a vendor, hotel, like you name it. So I've always been frustrated when I hear people complain, because when our film incentive went away, they were yelling and screaming about how they didn't want to give Hollywood any money, and you know, Hollywood's coming here and taking advantage of us. And I've just never seen it that way.
Why is that for you, though, for you to see it from that perspective?
Well, because I mean, my parents, for instance, have a business where they were working a lot with the film industry. So everyone who's yelling about the money going to Hollywood, I'm like, it's not going on. It's going to my parents who live 15 minutes away from here, and it's become a fairly substantial part of their income every year. So to me, the people who are yelling and they don't want to give money to Hollywood, to me, I say to them, you're not paying attention to the people who live in your state and the 30,000 plus people who work in the industry. You know, they were doing all this research around that time, where we were going up. I think they were filming Banshee here in Charlotte. Actually, it was Huntersville where this office was. It was right on the edge of Mecklenburg County in Huntersville. Anyway, and you know, there was 200-300 people that were working there. I mean, around the clock for several months. I mean, this was a small industry that was happening. Small in terms of just that show. You start adding on Homeland that was filming at the town, the number of commercials that are here. It's a lot of money in the local economy, and a lot of people making their living doing this. So this idea that it was coming from somewhere else was very frustrating. I know I'm going off on a tangent right now, but I would say that I don't think that Montana and Texas, to use an example, I don't know how much I'm really directly affected by that. I being, you know, a crew member in North Carolina, I would say that we compete heavily with Atlanta and with, you know, all of Georgia. And I don't think that's
because of the similar landscape that they have to here.
I think I think it's a combination of their locations. I think we're very similar cities. Obviously, they're a lot bigger, and their infrastructure I think is bigger than ours. But yeah, I think our location and just in general, the climate, I think, is very similar. We both have major airports right here in our cities, which is a really big deal. And I think we borrow from one another's crew base. I think there's a lot of people I know in Atlanta who come up here and work on movies and shows, and vice versa. When our incentive program was dismantled, I mean, a huge portion of North Carolina crew immediately moved to Atlanta. We use a lot of the same vendors. There's camera houses and prop houses and everything else that we use in Atlanta that, you know, we have them here, but they were, you know, more substantial when we had the full package here. I mean, there was people who were, you know, picking up and moving here, you know, when we had our proper incentives. So I would say it's good competition that Atlanta is so close, because we couldn't handle what they're doing anyway. But when they're full, when they have, you know, a lot going on, we're a very easy, you know, alternative to filming there.
Did you ever consider leaving Charlotte because of that as well too, or was that just something that you because understand because you mentioned before because I know that I think you had said that your brother came out before and then you showed up and then your parents showed up after the fact as well too. So, but having that insight beforehand, where you kind of did you kind of see that trajectory where if this does occur, that I'm not too concerned about losing a job here because I know there's still some work out there that maybe Atlanta can't cover that we can, and then we can make up for whatever the
Yeah,
gap is.
I wasn't really considering moving to Atlanta. What's funny is the only time I would kind of move to Atlanta is for the comedy scene, to be perfectly honest. Because I
Okay.
could go to Atlanta and do comedy. It's a slightly bigger scene. It's different. It's not, bigger doesn't always mean better, but I can say that I could do that, and I could go and work in Atlanta. I know for a fact that location management down there in particular is something where they're lacking a little bit.
Mm.
Um, and I know they're
And why
training
is
a
that
lot of
out
people.
there?
So
Why are they lacking that kind of a position?
I think that they were inundated with so much film so quickly.
Oh, I see.
I think they struggle with some positions in particular that they just didn't have. I mean, I think if we had, 4 movies filming here right now, we would struggle with, with finding crew for everything. The depth, I don't think is Atlanta. I don't think was prepared for that in terms of depth for each department there either.
Okay.
Now, 10 years later, I think they're much, better equipped, but I still think there's a couple positions, and I think locations is a position where I don't think they're quite as stocked there as they would like to be.
I see.
But Marvel movies have they're still happening, but I don't think they're doing them there as much if I remember correctly. I think they signed a deal with Pinewood Studios there, and I think it was about a 10-year deal with all of the Marvel movies that were coming. And I think that
That's
deal went away, so they moved out
okay. And that was
back
that
out
because
to
of the whole
Florida.
controversy surrounding what was it? There was like a bill that came through in Atlanta. Was it one of those reasons
There
for
was an
why they
abortion bill, but
right, that was the one.
yeah, I don't think there was a correlation. There may be that I'm just not aware of, but I didn't
Right.
think it was. In fact, I kind of remember wondering why there wasn't more backlash, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
There was, not to get into too hairy topic here, but
Right.
there was up here there was the bathroom bill, and I understand that
Yeah.
still has affected shows coming here because the
Yeah.
bathroom bill was a really big
I
deal,
think
and then the
Springsteen
abortion bill
canceled his
happened.
show here too, and that when that was announced, if I remember
Yeah, I mean,
correctly.
I've heard from people who kind of on the inside who say that bill is still, while it's not enforced, it's still kind of on the books, and a lot of people are like, we're not coming back until that's gone.
Mm.
And then in Atlanta, they had this abortion bill, and there was a lot of actresses and things like that were coming out and sort of boycotting the Atlanta thing, and it didn't quite have the ripple effect. It just, there was a little bit of a fizzle with that from what I remember. Again, I'm not super in touch with really how that went. I just,
Right.
From the news and people that I know, it just didn't quite have, it had a fizzle, not a big splash, I think is how I would put it.
So so here's what I'm curious about with you then, because um the one thing about the East Coast industry, especially when it comes to film commercial shows, um if someone comes out to you and says there's a show film that's going to be shot right, and they're looking into the following things, whether it be we're looking for a mountainous area or we're looking for a city landscape or farming community, whatever the case may be. um I don't fully understand the job of a scout manager or scout locator to
Mm-hmm.
like. I mean, I get it, but I don't think I understand the depths of it. So I'm wondering like if
Mm-hmm.
because how I understand it, it seems like it's simply a call that's made. Hey, we work for this production, and we came across your property, and we wanted to know if we are able to come out there, have a look, and discuss with what and if there's a potential opportunity for us to want to shoot there. We want to discuss these negotiations here with you, because I think one story that I
Mm-hmm.
remember as a kid that never left me was when they shot Twister. One of my teachers at the time, whose grandparents owned the land where they shot the film, where all the hail came through. That was her grandparents' land, and they had called them and said, "Hey, we work for, I think it was Warner Brothers. We want to come out to look at your property to shoot a film." And they thought this was a joke, and they hung up. And then they showed up, and they realized, "Oh, so you guys were legit." And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's how they do it. But again, I don't know the depths behind it. So if someone comes up to you and tells you, we want to shoot for the following things here at these locations, what do you got? What's that protocol like to get that started? Or do you guys already have all that in place where we can just call these guys because we know where to go to for the following whatever?
Yeah, I would say so. If you're talking about LA versus North Carolina, which I think is the question you're asking about, how's it done here? Like
Right.
in LA, they certainly have greater databases and things like that. They've been doing it forever, so they have books. Literally, you want a
Right.
house, what style of house, and they turn to page 48, and there it is. You know, it's essentially that. Here is a little less. It's a little less formal, I guess. Maybe I would say we just, there's probably I don't know, 6, 8 of us in town who do this, and we all have our own databases and we all share databases. So essentially, what happens where there's location management is kind of twofold. There's a creative thing in the beginning, and then it becomes a much more of a we do logistics essentially.
Right.
So if Homeland, they say we need something that looks like an office, or we need a whatever it is, like you said, we need a farm. That's
Right.
one scene. They're going to go to a farm. I have some people that I've worked with over the years, 20 years of doing this. You get to meet some people. So I have a few sort of in my database that I can go to refer to, and either share that and say, is this kind of what you were thinking? Let's go get some fresh pictures and look, and then I will reach out to those folks. Sometimes it's a cold call. And cold calls can be a kind of a variety of things, but you don't want to just show up on people's property. So you're usually looking for some kind of a, word of mouth, who knows who, that kind of thing, before you are reaching out, because you want to be gentle about it, because for a number of reasons. One being, you don't want to scare anybody, especially today. That's usually one of my biggest concerns is you don't want to just show up unannounced and scare somebody. But it's also just a validity. You want someone from the town to say, hey, listen, I know so and so from the city here, or something like that. They were telling me about your farm, whatever it might be. So I essentially will go and make first contact, give them the basics on what the project is, the dates of filming, what there's parameters are always going to change, whether it's a commercial, a TV show. If you have a TV show that's going to run multiple episodes, it's going to be one of the anchor locations. It's reoccurring. It's a different conversation than we want to shoot a John Deere commercial, Oh,
I see.
So the job it's really hard to really kind of pinpoint exactly kind of what each job is going to be. They're always kind of different. So on the creative side, you get to choose what kind of farm it is. You get to choose, everything from the angle where you want to be. There's usually a lot of different options, and that's kind of there's a lot of fun in that aspect of it, and finding a farm and finding the place that no one knew was around, or going a little further out and finding a cool place, picturesque, working on a show here that's supposed to be shot in Pennsylvania. There's something really interesting and creative about finding something that looks like an Amish farm, and the logistics. I mean, essentially everything that we touch, everything that the camera sees, every parking lot needs to have some kind of a filming or non-filming location agreement. It needs to have insurance. It needs to be a negotiated price, and transparency on what exactly is going to be done. Is there going to be stunts? Is it just going to be literally putting gear, or are we going to be in a neighborhood with lights, filming for a week overnight? And do we have to talk to every single person in the neighborhood to make sure that they're aware of what we're doing, okay with it? Do we need to help them block their windows from the light at night? It can get murky on all the responsibilities that we have. Who has dogs? When's trash day? We handle police, security. You name it.
Are you guys given? So, for example, if someone comes up to you and says, we're going to shoot. Let's use Marvel as an example. We're going to shoot a Marvel film out there, and we need a suburban neighborhood, and we're looking more towards upper middle class, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if they tell you, but we also need the nearest farm for the scene because for whatever reasons, do they give you a heads up about what the budget's going to be, or are you guys just assuming that they're looking for this location and then they figure out the budget later on to add to the negotiations? or
Yeah.
are you guys aware of that ahead of time so that you have an idea? Okay, so if we're looking at this amount of money to invest in these type of things, these are the neighbors we should probably look into because we can probably work out a better deal with these guys because we know them, or more like we can get a better working relationship with them to set whatever we need to have set up for that. So I'm curious about how that process works out in that respect.
Yeah, I think it's again, each moment on a project is going to be a little bit different. You're
Okay.
prioritizing needs, right? So if we have to film this neighborhood and the farm on the same day, for instance, or even
Right.
one day to the next day, they don't want to shoot in one part of the town and then the next part of the town the next day be an hour and a half away, for instance.
Right.
Sometimes they're like, no, we need to find a neighborhood and a farm in the same place. That really limits where you're going to scout. You're not going to go more than a few miles away to find either the neighborhood or the farm, right? So therefore the proximity became the highest priority in that moment. Sometimes they just want the most specific beautiful farm you could possibly find, and therefore that becomes, doesn't matter how much it costs or where it is necessarily. So proximity is not even in the conversation. Now it's just about finding the picturesque location. Sometimes I've been on projects where an actor is he's slightly older and they're like, we need to do all this in a very short range, right? So then proximity again becomes an important need. Sometimes if they have a specific kind of neighborhood, we don't get to really, it's just finding the builder and what kind of homes they built, and that's going to lead us where we're at. So as far as budget though, it's they generally have an idea of what their budget is. Again, it just becomes what becomes most important in those moments. Is finding the location more important than whatever the stunt that they're doing that day, the special effects that are happening, whether it's visual or special effects. Those things can often kind of trump the location needs, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Staying inside the zone, right? So if you film in Charlotte, I think it's essentially like 45 minutes, right? Anything that's beyond about like it's approximately 45 minutes, you then have to pay people more for their drive time and when you start and end your day, which shortens the amount of time you could film within your 12-hour day, which affects your union folks, which affects your actors, especially if you have kids in the show and how much time they can be on set. So suddenly the schedule then becomes the top priority, not necessarily, and by proxy, like then the budget and the location needs become, nope, you got to be inside the zone. We've here in North Carolina, what are we, 13 miles from South Carolina? It used to be that we could film down there in South Carolina. We'd film all the way down into Chester and those places. And once the film incentive race, we'll call it, each state had their own, and they were trying to coax film projects there. That became not off limits for us, but it certainly was. Then films and TV shows had to decide: do they want to lose the money they would normally be saving in the film incentive aspect, by going into South Carolina? And that then becomes, it better be a really good location for the reason for going down South Carolina, because you're losing 25 cents on the dollar by filming outside of North Carolina on that day, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's just, whatever is the most important need becomes the priority, and that drives sort of what I'm looking for or the logistics of what I'm doing.
Have you ever taken on a project that just did not work out at all? And what I mean by that is if especially if it's a big, a really big project that has a lot of, potential for being successful, they know that this is going to turn out well, but they come out to you and they say, we're looking for the following things. And you've done your absolute best to find everything they're looking for, but either it didn't work out for, the people didn't want you on the property. We're not going to be around. Whatever those issues may be. And if that has happened before, what are the consequences of that for, does that leave like a bad stain in the resume, or is it just hey, we just couldn't get we can't shoot here, so we're just going to go to, in this case, let's say South Carolina. We're going to go down there and see what they can offer to us, but we're on a budget right, and we're on a time stream right now. We need to get this done ASAP, but you can't find it in time because none of the things are working out for you to get the films or whatever is shot there. So anything of that sort that comes to mind of how you would how that gets handled?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's been an instance when a project has decided to be here to come to this region. I don't think there's been a moment where it's been like, we just didn't find it. Because filmmaking is problem solving, it's compromise, right. It's collaboration, right? So if they say, sometimes they show up with a magical thing in their head where they say, oh, we want this blue house with a long driveway with trees going up, and it's all this. And it's like, okay, do you have reference pictures of that? And they're like, no, that's just what we want. It's like, okay, so that doesn't exist. So let's then find something that's real. Let's show you the closest thing, because it happens all the time. They have this idea of what they want, and it's like, yeah, but that's imaginary what you're thinking of. So let's find something similar and close to it. So I don't know if I've ever completely failed at finding something. We've certainly had to be very, very creative, and that's where the collaboration with your production designer and sometimes special effects folks comes into play. On Homeland, we had, I think in the script it was like a mountain villa in Iran or something like that. It was this description of it, and I was like, we're in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had to wrap my head around, what does that mean? Then it got with the production designer. It's like, well, I just kind of need structures, that aren't brand new, that have, this certain like values to them. And we ended up finding like an old gas station that had parts of the walls were gone. It was gutted on the inside. So you were down to like studs and this old, and it, with his help and with what he sort of had in mind for it, that helped solve what that problem was, if that makes sense. So there's never we didn't find it, we have to move on. That's not usually what happens. It becomes, how do we creatively solve this? And I think, I don't know if it's always the last resort, but I've been in so many sort of conversations with, I bring up Homeland a lot because it was a really special experience with some of the best filmmakers around. And it would sometimes come down to, this is just a few lines in the script. The easiest thing for us to do is just to erase those and write something new in there. And this is not me saying it. This is the people way above my pay grade go, okay, well, if it can't be this, what's the best written way? Get the writers involved and say, what else could this be? What else? What is the more creative answer? And I would actually go so far as to say that once you have to, become more creative and problem solve from a creativity standpoint, as opposed to a logistical standpoint, which are a little more boring to me. And you get those brains. Well, that to me is the most fun part of filmmaking, is saying, okay, it can't be this. What is an interesting way to solve this problem? That to me is the best filmmaking, that the best films and the best scenes and things like that come from those creative juices, saying we have to solve this problem. What's the best way to do it? It can be a lot of fun. It can be stressful. Usually it's very stressful, but I think it's really fun and interesting.
Do you, because I'm curious, because you're the thing, I'm bringing up your comedy here real quickly because because you talk about creative juices and being having that creative collaboration where you hear people talk about whatever ways to resolve the issue. But I'm also curious about if whenever you are, let's say, for example, you're working on a set for something and, you have a specific job in mind, but I'm not sure if you ever step outside of your job description. And what I mean by that is like, go to a director or producer and say, by the way, listen, you're looking for X, Y, and Z. I think the best idea to go about this, because I read the script and the script says the following. I think you may need to change this and have the actor say this, so that way because we can't get the shot that we need for this scene that you're going to shoot here, we could probably go from this angle instead. And so basically, I'm wondering if you ever actually have any input that could help influence, whether it be a minuscule thing to some people, but actually help contribute in that capacity where it may less change the entire scene, but help to make it for the better. Because if you're saying everyone's involved, I'm not sure to what capacity if they're only focusing on the people at top, or they're willing to listen to what does Jason have to say, because he knows their location better than we do. So, Jason, what do you recommend?
Yeah. Right. I would say that to a degree, yes. I would never sort of presume to change, dialogue, for instance.
Right.
But I know that Michael Click and these guys would say, approach this like you're a director, and again,
right.
it's not something I do as much anymore. I think it's my focus went elsewhere, and I think it was around Homeland. We're saying it's an exceptionally difficult job, and I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not sure I was the best at it, but I shouldn't be cutting myself down. But he would tell you to think about this like you're a director, like solve that problem, approach it like that. And also, I think if you can't solve the problem, or more importantly, if you see what a problem is, or there is a problem, I think bring up some ways to solve it, as opposed to just saying, hey, there's a problem over there, somebody should fix it. Show up with some ideas. So I would say that's certainly something that has happened where, and I'm trying to think of an example, but, showing up and just saying there's a problem without having some sort of a solution or some suggestion on how to make it better, I think that applies to everything, not just filmmaking.
Right.
So, and I think, it happens regularly. You might say here's something that happens quite a bit. I'll say in the commercial world, to give an example. A lot of times they say, we want a home that is of a certain age, that hasn't been remodeled, but does have some sort of modern sort of look about it or whatever.
Right.
And everybody will show up here and they may want that in their commercial. But when you get here, you realize that all the rooms are 12 by 12 and you can't get a film crew in there.
Right.
So then you have to say, you basically have to, talk them into to some degree, or give them the idea, give them their own idea of getting something that's a little more modern, that has been remodeled, so that you can fit a film crew in there. That becomes a logistical issue. Every time you go into a small house, I say, there's nowhere we can't put the camera anywhere because the room is too small. And this happens over and over and over again. They may want something older, but it's like, yeah, you do, but you need modern touches. And one of the most sort of what you don't think about of modern touches is when they make rooms bigger. They take walls out, and suddenly this kitchen isn't a tiny little what do they call them, alley kitchen.
I'm not sure, but I know what you're talking about, though. Yeah,
it's not just one thing. You're never going to shoot in one of those. It's just not going to happen. You need some of the look of that, but you need it to be a bigger kitchen. You need one of those walls gone so they can film in there. Right. That is something that we do regularly, I think, as locations people. Show them something that's a little bit older, but it's actually more modern than they realize.
I actually I want to transition in with you real quick, because I told you earlier today that I had checked out your YouTube channel, and one of the things I've come across quite a few of them actually was, apart from your stand up, was actually forgive me, George and Morty,
Monty, George and
Monty.
Monty.
Thank you, my apologies. Yes, Monty.
That's all right.
So I want to ask you about that, because the thing is that I'm not sure if this was, because I'm looking at the various videos you have on there. They go back quite a few years, but you had talked about at one point how, and you kind of touched upon it as well too for a little bit, where you're looking at an all day shift pretty much, where you're on the set for a lengthy period of time. And then, because it's funny, because I've heard you talk to us before in a conversation, and I'm watching those videos. One, you look refreshed, like at least for the sketch you guys are doing. It looks really well fine tuned, edited very well, intercut with the commercials, and then the jokes. And I saw one that you did where you guys were in the car. You had the costume on with I forgot what animal it was you had on, but anyways, but it was
like a mouse.
Yeah, exactly. And you were laughing, and then it was a blooper reel.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I'm bringing this up is because one thing that I don't truly think I understand, and I've talked to a lot of filmmakers and actors that do this here, but sometimes it's almost singular for them to a degree. But if you're doing comedy and then scout locations, and then you're doing that somewhere in the middle there, I'm not sure how hard was it for you to be able to sustain that for yourself, in between that time, because I'm not sure, once Homeland was done, then I have 2 weeks to myself, and then I'm gonna do those skits on in between that period, or
Right.
I'm gonna get some rest, and then I'm gonna get back on it, a week later, or whatever the case may be. So when it comes to the amount of work that's involved with that here, because I kind of want to delve into a little bit here about the whole IATSE, I think that's the name of the union. IATSE, thank you.
IATSE, yeah.
IATSE. So, that was a major thing that was brought to a lot of people's attention, that these guys are overworked and they need time to regroup and get back on the horse. But in between that time, when you're doing all of that, did you ever feel like at any point, as much as I'm enjoying what I'm doing with the scout location, working on the productions here, this is killing me, because I do want to do this here, but I don't have the energy to want to do this now because I'm exhausted and I don't have the abilities right now to think of something funny to do. Because what I saw in between all those videos there, I'm sure a lot of it was in between the time you were working on those productions for those lengthy period of time. But I point out because you look refreshed, because you look like you have a lot of energy in there. I'm sure a lot of it's acting, but to me, it seemed like it was a genuine rest period where you had, the ability to regroup and get back into it. So I'm curious about how that works out for you.
You bring up some really, really good, I think, very important questions. I firmly believe that I think the way that film has been done for a very long time is a ridiculous amount of work.
Right.
For a ridiculous amount of time, right? I do think it's unhealthy, and I don't think it needs to be that way. It's always a bottom line issue. I mean, they will budget a 12-hour day, and if you're in locations, especially on a TV show, you're not working 12 hours. You're working more than 12 hours, and that's every day. And Homeland to me was eye-opening for the grind that television is. And that to me was one of the best run shows that was around at the time, and probably even still now. I mean, they were fantastic at that. I think they did take care of their people. But it was just the nature of working for, 7 months, 8 months, or whatever. I can't remember exactly what it was. I was working 6-day weeks and 12 plus hours a day for that amount of time. And it was an incredible grind. There's some jobs on films that are you overlap episodes, right? So we did 2 location managers. I would do one episode, Carl Golden would do the other episode. So when Carl's episode was filming, we were prepping, right? And then we would film and Carl would be prepping the next one. The problem is that after I'm finished, I still need to wrap the episode we just did while I'm prepping the next one. There were a lot of people. There's a lot of people who are much, much better than I am and was at managing that time. I'm certainly not going to, overstate how I did that. But it was a grind. Everybody was wore out after that. And I think the bigger question, I think where you're getting at is, I think some changes need to be made in how films are done. That's number one. Number two, I just think they can make it easier on people. That's just my big takeaway. There's ways to make it easier, and I hope they do it. But I think at some point, as a filmmaker, why as crew members did we get into doing what we're doing? It's at some point you got to decide, I don't want to work on your project. I want to work on my project.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line. At some point you have to do that. And I think, I was in it, 10, 12 years or whatever. And I think John Schwartz and I with the Georgia Monty we had produced a couple features together, and we said, hey, let's have some fun and challenge ourselves to do a couple short films. We were thinking about what our next feature was going to be. So we started writing these Georgia Monties, and when we first started doing them, they were 8 minutes long and 5 minutes long, and we decided that as much fun as that was, we can make them shorter. So they got shorter and shorter as we went along. We always wanted to have the value of them be high, be good, high production value. Yeah. And because we're both filmmakers and we have filmmaker friends on a lower budget, we were able to do that. Right. We could move quickly. John is a really good editor. Since then, I've started editing. Eric Murphy, who shot quite a few of those, has a lot of his own gear. And we were able to sort of share work, and that's really more came from John than me. That we, able to pay a little bit to some of these guys, and also kind of get a working relationship with them. So we, we're able to use them on other projects. And again, that was more John than me. I do want to be clear about that. And we're friends. So we always wanted to work on projects together. So once I got out of doing what I call the long form filming, whether it was movies and TV and just going back to commercial work, that provided a lot more time for me to work on my own projects, to work on writing stand-up, to work on writing better, George Amani's and other scripts that we were working on, because we, we'll produce TV commercials and things like that now, and we write and produce those together. So, what some of the stuff that you're seeing is just us doing finally what we really want to do. It was not work on somebody else's project. I want to work on my project. I want to be on camera and have a good time and write funny stuff. That's why, we didn't always do it. We like to put bloopers in there. We're having a great time.
Yeah.
We're just cutting up all the time and telling jokes and having fun. And in those moments, especially there, I mean, they're long days, but it's not the same as the grind of a bigger movie or whatever than it is. Right. I mean, we shoot that with, I think the most we have 6-8 people, but now we do them with 4 people. We're doing everything, like setting up the lights and getting guys to run the sound side of it. So we're doing it in a much bare bones, stripped down version. And John's a very, very good director, and Eric is an excellent director of photography. And so there we have the luxury of that, of having that kind of experience. So we could do it on a no budget. I mean, at this point, we're not hardly spending any money at all when we do them. The feature, where we're kind of looking at potentially doing a feature, so that'll be a different story, though, I think.
Is it with the feature you're talking about, though? Is that more? Are you looking at more in an independent standpoint, or are you already looking at, well, we're going to talk to agents and managers to look into potentially get that greenlit through a studio, if you will?
Yeah, I don't think we're in a position to really do that, to be honest. I mean, okay. I think both of us would say, yeah, would love to have Netflix jump in and shoot our movie. But I think for us, it's I think YouTube has actually become, I think, a really good outlet for independent filmmakers and for stand-up comics. I mean, how many stand-up comics are putting their shows out on their specials out on YouTube? And I think the metric of views and followers is sort of trumping the idea of selling something to Netflix. I think everybody would want to do that, right. But put it on YouTube and get 1 million views and have Netflix or somebody else say, okay, that's pretty good, let's pay attention to them, and maybe the next time you shoot one, they'll buy it or they'll shoot it for you. The social media metrics and views and follows is it's kind of king right now for whatever you're talking about. So for me, I don't think either one of us have any delusions of being able to sell anything or get funding for that right out of the gate.
So with the film that you're referring to now, because it's a comedy, was there ever a consideration that because you're in the you're more or less in the industry, and I'm bringing this up here about getting the film made. You talked about YouTube, which was something I kind of forgot about, but you're 100% right about that. But it sounds like to me you're coming purely from a creative standpoint. Like we want to get this out there because we want to tell the story and then share with the world, and whatever comes out of it comes out. It is what it is. But I've also talked to a lot of people too that have an idea, but I want to get the film distributed. I'm not sure if that's something you guys ever considered doing, and if you did, understanding how the engine works, if you will, if you had some perception about, okay, so if we do this here, what lanes are we going to take? Because if we want to make the film that we want to make, knowing that how we can pull it off, where we have more or less 100% control, and then we can just put it on YouTube, we're good with that. Or was it a consideration that we want to make this film and we want to get it distributed so that way hopefully it could help us in terms of business terms, where we are able to hopefully get some awareness and we get it out to the right people, and therefore they can see what we're pulling off here, so that way we have more or less a foot in the door, hopefully with an opportunity to do other things that we want to be able to expand on, if you will. So I hope it's not a convoluted question, but I hope you understand what I'm referring to here.
Yeah, I mean, well, we did a movie, Insignificant Others, and the process of getting that to festivals and then getting distribution, which ultimately I'm going to say we, but John did. And I just think it was a grind. And there's this common sort of,
You got to pay a fee
you
too
know,
to enter, right?
pardon me.
You got to pay a fee to enter the festivals.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those sort of fees are less scary than, if you're already putting that much money and time into something, spending $50 to get $100 to get it into a festival is, I don't even think some of them are short, less than that. But it's making the movies the easy part. Getting anyone to pay attention to what you're doing. What I started to say was that nobody cares is a very, very difficult thing to come to terms with as an artist, as a performer, as a filmmaker.
Right.
And it sounds it sounds crappy to say it. And I don't mean it in a, don't do this because we're crazy for trying. It's not like that, but being aware that nobody's going to care about your project as much as you do, whether you hire people to do it or once you do it, getting distribution for it. Being creative and figuring out how to do that is very, very difficult. So, I wish anybody luck who's kind of in that world, honestly. Just not easy to do. Yeah, especially, outside of places like LA where you got people who make those decisions, it's all very, very challenging. So for us, I think it's, word of mouth and these follows and stuff, I think they're more valuable. And I think it's more likely to have something go viral than it is to oftentimes get a meeting with somebody and get somebody to show interest. Like I said, we have had Insignificant Others as an example to, where people have, it was part of a distribution deal, but I just,
did it leave like a bad taste in your mouth, or was there more or less kind of like a positive experience coming out of that?
Well, I mean, that's something I think really John would speak to more, but I think it was good. I mean, the money was made back, and then some, which I think is not all movies get that.
Yeah.
But I just think the amount of work that it took to what we got in return and what did any great directing or producing gigs come out of it, things like that I'm not sure, from John's perspective. He's certainly doing a lot more work now. So maybe in the long term, but I think for us, it's more about, let's not worry about that. Let's worry about getting it right. And like you said, let's make it creatively interesting and funny and get it out there so people can see it. And I think there's a lot of value to that as opposed to swinging for the fence. I think it's sort of like, writing music or whatever, and you want to hit the one hit wonder, or you want whatever it is. It's like, just get your work out there. If you get your work out there, I think that's more important than worrying about the money right now. Like, I say sort of laughing, but nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows what we've done. But I will hang my hat on all of these projects that we've done. So, you found them, other people will find them too. And hopefully they'll, enough word of mouth will happen where we'll get some bigger opportunities. I think I'm happy with that because I love doing this. I love working with John and writing features and writing these sketches and video shorts and all this kind of stuff. That to me I'm kind of already winning with that. So that may sound a little defeatist, but I don't mean it to be. It's someone's going to find stuff. And when I take my shots, I think hopefully people will see this trail of all the things that I've done before. And I think there's a lot of value in that, more than people kind of give credit to, I think.
I think you may have talked about this before, but I'm hoping you can delve into it here for me, because you actually come from, I think you're actually the very first person in this capacity here that's actually explain what your motivations is for just getting the project done and getting it out there. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm curious about your perspective on criticism, and I'm asking that question because apart from being a stand-up comic, which you've dealt with your form of criticism in that capacity, and then you have projects you've worked on, and obviously it's all subjective to a lot of people where it didn't work for me, and sometimes the critiques are rather shallow or just have no merit, and they just say things for just talking out of their ass. But some have some valid critiques and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But when you're doing something of this sort, like say for example, like the skits that I've come across on YouTube, I've enjoyed all of them from the ones I've come across so far.
Great, thank you.
But when you are coming across somebody and you say, let's say you get your film made and you put it on YouTube and you say, I hope people enjoy it. But you come across somebody that says to you, I saw this film, it fucking sucked. It was the worst shit I've ever seen. But I'm wondering how you've, because of, I'm sure you've developed some callous, considering I think most communities tend to have a good bit of callous to deal with that. But in that capacity, right, you put your heart and soul in something that you really, not saying you're not passionate about stand-up, but you're really passionate about this project here. Mm-hmm. Does that change a little bit for you about how you're looking at that? Or is it just, are you looking purely, hey, I put it out there. If people don't like it, they don't like it. And if they say it sucks, whatever. I got to do what I got to do, and I'm happy with that, and that's currency for me. Yeah.
I mean, listen, if you are sensitive in anything that any art that you're involved in, I think there's two sides to this, right? There's common sense where it's like, yeah, we're all human and things affect us, right? So yeah, I prefer positive reinforcement to things. I prefer doing something that people do get a kick out of and they laugh at it, or they're it's made them feel a certain way. And I think that's great. But that's also unrealistic to think you're going to please everybody. And you can't get worked up. You know what I mean? It's all, unless someone comes up to me and is like, you are the worst that I've ever seen. That feels real. Stuff online, it's still kind of not real.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I think, I haven't had a ton of people come up and say that you're really bad at this. You maybe don't want to do this. I'm like, oh God damn, that's that's pretty rough. So to me, it's like, yeah, like I said, I'm human. I'm certainly affected by it, but how much stock am I putting into it? Especially on TikTok, and I used to post stuff on Reddit all the time. People would be as creative as I was insulting me. You know what I mean? Like as much creativity as I put into a joke, they put into roasting me for that joke. And I'm like, I've done this joke in front of, thousands of people, and I know it's funny, but for some reason you're the guy who didn't like it and didn't get it. And it's like, all right, you got something else going on. That's a little bit of a you problem, not a me problem. So, all that being said, of course you want people to like your stuff. Of course you do. So it's not like it's not going to have no effect, but also what I know about things is half the time when you're getting criticized for something, that's something that you did in the past. I don't know if it's 5 minutes ago or 5 weeks ago. I'm already working on something else. I'm like, sure, I'll note I'll note your displeasure about that. And if it's like constructive in any way at all, and they're like, I just really don't like this. When you say this particular thing, either it didn't work or it hurt my feelings or whatever it might be. I mean, I'll give it a moment to say and assess whether or not. Well, I mean, I'm going to assess a little bit. I don't want to. I'll put it like this: I don't want to do any jokes that are so mean that it's really hurting people. Right. If it hurts a person in a room full of 400 people, I'm not going to worry too much about it. But if I get the same notes and if I get that, I don't want to hurt anybody. So you're right that I have a callus built up when it comes to stand up, but the callus is built up because it's an easy target. You're very vulnerable. You're putting it all out there.
Right. And
I've gotten enough rejection, and rejection to me is quiet. Rejection is very rarely loud. Rejection is it's a not a laugh. It's the wrong kind of laugh, or it's a groan, or if it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Criticism and real hurtful stuff isn't usually very loud to me. So, but all of my successes and just to use like one joke in particular that's been really, really good. If one person doesn't like it, it's kind of like, all right, I'll move on from that. What do I care?
I've talked to a few comedians on the show before, and every comedian that I spoke with has a different perspective on things, and it's not uncommon. So, but the reason I'm bringing this up with you is because when I hear your stand up, from what I heard that night, a few weeks ago, and then having her what what you have on your video. And I'll even point out too, which is something that I really did appreciate that you've done, and I don't think you've done it in some time, which is where I forgot the name of the videos, but you're visiting all these different locations, and you want to show
all over the place,
all over
the place
yes,
with Jason Allen King.
Yes,
That's
so
awesome, man.
I love those videos because you were in Buffalo, you were in Oklahoma, you were in Florida, and you always. So what was interesting for me was because it that was actually because I saw those first before I saw the Georgian Monty show. I keep saying Morty, but Monty. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right.
So I saw that first. That to me was where I think I think the best way I could describe it, what I took notice from you was that I think that's where I realized that that's where the storytelling side of you comes out, if that makes any sense. Where this is the place, and then I forgot I was in Buffalo where you made up some story, and then halfway through you stopped like, nah, I'm just making all that stuff up. That to me I thought was genius. And I'm saying that because there was a narrative that you were creating, and then the narrative, the joke wasn't the narrative, it was the journey that you were going through was more or less the narrative, right? And the only thing I wish about I'm not going to say it's a complaint because it isn't a complaint, but I guess it's my selfishness, is that I wish they were longer because there was so much more that I felt like that could have come out of that here. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with just simply timing, to be able to put it all together, given your schedule and whatnot. That part, I think, that was the reason for that. I believe it came out.
That's exactly right. It was just anyone was saying, don't. At the time, I mean, this is several years ago. I went to the LA Comedy Shorts Festival, and all the people there were like, well, I went to a bunch of panels and met other directors and producers and people with College Humor and Funny or Die and a couple of the other streaming networks, and they were all like, if you're producing anything that's longer than 4 minutes, you're crazy. No one's going to watch it anymore. Yeah, and that's when you'll see from George and Monty to the videos that I was doing. It's like I'm doing everything I can to keep it under 4 minutes. I know I'm not always successful, but that's partially.
I actually thought the ones that were longer actually were more impactful. I thought, not to say the other were not. I'm not implying that here, but sure. But I guess this is the part that I was curious with you, because I'm talking about those videos specifically because with your stand up, honestly, I expected the set that you did on out here in Gastonia was actually be a couple minutes, because that's kind of that was the impression that I got from it, especially with the opener, where a couple minutes and then boom, the next one comes up. But you actually, I think out of everybody there that night, you had the longest set. I think it was like 40 minutes, somewhere around there. And you brought up, and it's funny because I was trying to see how I can throw this question there, but that you happen to bring it up, that now reminded me. But the amount of time that you spent on putting the videos together, I'm not sure how much of that. What's the best way I could describe it? Do you feel like if it dilutes what your intentions are? Like, I want to make this video, but I have this amount of time that I want to put into here. But if the word of mouth and the advice is keep it at this length, is it harder for you to do that? Because to me, when I saw your special, or not special, I'm gonna say your stand up, that to me, I felt like was where your strengths are at, because you had the time to expand it. And I think every comedian is like this. It's not exclusive to you. But when I saw that, I was like, this is too truncated for his form of storytelling, which it fits, but it doesn't fit, if that makes any sense. So, and there's a part of me that wondered, because maybe you haven't done it for a while, because it doesn't justify your form of narrative, if you will, that you are trying to more or less formulate here for the video. So I hope it's not a convoluted question, but I'm wondering, I hope you understand where I'm coming from, because I'm wondering if that was one of the reasons maybe you have stopped for doing that, because I know you still do your stand up across the country, but if you're not making those videos as often, was that the reason why you had put a stop to that? Just because of it's just too much work, but in order for me to justify the work, I need more time, and if this is the recommended time frame, I don't think I'm going to do that here, unless you're saying whatever, fuck, I'm just going to do what I want, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, a bunch of sort of, to answer some of these questions, it's definitely the more time you have, I think, you want to do the best you can with the time that you have, I guess.
Right.
And for me, I took that Seinfeld quote where he said, he's like, I do comedy for free. They pay me to travel. the idea that I'm going out there
I
to see all these different places. And I told myself, I was like, I'm going to go do this for everywhere I go. Right. So, but whether it's Buffalo or it's,
Port
in the middle of
Charlotte,
nowhere,
yeah.
Johnsontown, like where no one ever knows Johnson. I was like, I bet Johnsontown's kind of fun if you put it in the right perspective. That's what I told myself. So I was like, all right, I'll do that. And I was doing it was great. And I'll tell you the reason why I stopped is because the last one that I haven't even put it out yet, which I am going to put it out. I'll bring the story back around. I was out west. I was doing shows in Coos Bay in it's in Oregon. Coos Bay is just sort of this tiny little middle of nowhere town, and then Medford, Oregon. And I'm actually going back there in April. I'm going back to Medford, and then so they call them runs. So you do a couple shows. So I did Portland, Coos Bay, and Medford. So I was out there. So I have that one. I'm going to put that one out relatively soon. Actually, it's funny that you're bringing that up. I'm just, for me, I want to show where I'm at, what I'm doing in a fun way. Also, I would love to be a host of a TV show. I would think a travel show or a cooking show, whatever it might be. The idea of that to me has always been sort of fun. And as a performer, as an on-camera personality, or however you want to put it, comedian, I think some of this stuff is a bit of a calling card, and saying, down the road when I can get some management or representation to say, hey, listen, this is something I'm interested in. Here's some things that I just did on my own with an iPhone and a selfie stick. There's something to this. So I appreciate that you're looking at the storytelling aspect of it, because that's what I want too. I want to show that, if it were given to me, I mean, even reality shows have writers. So I have some direction and some purpose, and setting up and landing jokes, not from stage, but from that sort of medium, however you want to call it, I think is important, right? Yeah. Being able to write jokes in that environment, as opposed to just being on stage. The same way it's different than writing jokes in a script, whether it's a feature film or a TV show or whatever. It's different on stage, or a late night set. Those are all slightly different sort of styles of writing and joke writing in particular. So would they be longer had I had the opportunity? I think yes. Okay. I'm definitely keeping them shorter, because I want the clicks, and that's sort of dictating that to some degree. I think, I can't remember what the metrics are exactly, but I mean, at every minute that you go shorter, the click count goes higher, and that's just the nature of things. Now that's just what what our brains are kind of being trained to do, which is kind of depressing. Yeah, but I think there'll be moments where those things will change. People get tired of everything. With a short attention span comes a short attention span. So us watching 30-second videos isn't always going to be that way. Some kid at some point is going to go, I want a 10-minute video. Where do I go watch 10 minutes? I also think it's very funny that we have this very short attention span, where a lot of people are not watching movies as much. They're like, 2 hours. I don't know if I could watch a 2-hour movie. They're like, what TV show can I binge for 8 hours? All of it is so hypocritical and doesn't make any sense. But I mean, I would certainly do longer ones, and
I hope you do, because you have a really good talent. I would say, you have a good talent for that, because and the thing is that here's the thing. I'm gonna give you your flowers on this as well too, because I've been fortunate enough to talk with a lot of really incredible filmmakers and actors as well too. That they've made. I've talked to an actor by the name, who's also writer director too, name of Adam Hampton, and he had done a show that's on YouTube as well too. That's called Rough Cut. I love that show. I think that show is phenomenal, but no one's ever seen it, or very few people have seen it, I should say. But when I reached out to him and said, this show is fucking incredible. Like the details that you have, put into the show, the storytelling, just all those the great things that I enjoyed about it. And I never asked him directly, but I'm not sure, how much it cost. He's like, honestly, like 95% of it was all volunteer work. I was like, if you can get 95% of volunteer work to get that top quality stuff, and I told him and his other filmmaker, Kyle Henderson, I say, there's no reason why there should be shitty films or shitty TV shows, because this does not give an excuse for like, well, I didn't have the money for that. That's all nonsense. When I watch your videos, that's more or less the same perception that I get as well too. Is like, if I can get this out of that for 5 minutes here, at least from my perspective, if I want more, I'm not saying that, I'm the metric. That's not what I'm implying here. But if I want more, imagine someone else who comes across here, if they can get that, if they get the same film that I got from that, that's because I think the person that's running that whole gig there does a really good job in terms of storytelling. So again, this is not me kissing your ass. I hope it doesn't come across that way, but I certainly am giving your flowers, because that's something that I've noticed that I picked up from you. And then when I watched the George and Monty skits as well too, then I realized, okay, so this is a really good story. So clearly you've had other people that helped out to formulate the stories and and do the bits as well too. And that all shows there as well. But and I'm not one about I hope you get rich and famous. That's not really why I'm giving those flowers there. But it's more about, I think, opportunities, because if you said, since you mentioned now you wanted to be a host, honestly, I think you'd be great at it as well. I really do. I think you'd be that good of a host. I appreciate it. No, and I mean that as well, because I hope you don't mind me doing this here, but it's I think it's fantastic that there is great quality work in the area when it comes to the various entertainments we get. But to me, it's more important, I think, if you find the hidden gems. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I think that because I came across that, honestly, those little the short episodes you do along with the skits, that actually gave me more incentive to want to reach out to speak with you, because I felt like there was a great storyteller in that capacity. So and I'm actually
that means a lot, and I like that you're kind of focusing on the storytelling aspect of it. If you don't mind me jumping in, I think it's the one of the things I think that might be missing in a lot of sort of the TikTok world and all that, where it's like this quick, it's a quick sort of one joke, or as opposed to, every joke has a narrative to it if you do it right, you know what I mean? And I think, I think focusing on that says a lot about, you as a consumer, and I hope other people do that as well. I think storytelling is, I don't know, it's the best part about everything we do, from an entertainer and a consumer. Like I watch TV, I watch movies, I love stand-up comedy, music, you name it. So anything that has an arc, that has some thought put into it, that is not sort of mindless and just feeding a laugh for no other purpose, I think that gets a little old. So I appreciate that. Appreciate you saying it and making that note. Yeah.
No, you're welcome. Well, but so this brings me back to because I know I want to find a tangent, because there was a reason I was to get to that, but it's because when you start going to these locations, I'm sure you're thinking, let's just see what I can get out there, but I'm not sure if you're thinking of like, well, what's the history? Like, do you do research about, okay, I'm going to go to this location. What history do they have that I can look for, or is it simply just cold cut where you show up, cold turkey? I'm going to say you show up and you see, okay, so someone told me this on the way over here. I'll remember that. And I'm going to find this place. What's the history on this place? No one can give me answers. Well, I'll just make something up, and then use that as the punchline, if you will.
Yeah. You know what? It's a little bit of all of that. So I will definitely do a little bit of research. I'm looking at Wikipedia, and, Wikipedia oftentimes will have a ton of stuff and sometimes not. I'll sometimes go to like the state or local website and say, oh yeah, what's Johnson, Tennessee known for? Just simple questions like that. And if I find something in there that I think I can find some humor in it, then I'll take it. And one of the things that I would do a lot is fact or fiction, right? That was one of the bits throughout, and I would give, throughout the show a couple of facts, and you decide whether or not you think that's true or not. And sometimes I would pay it off, sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes I'd pay it off in the moment. Other times I would sort of let it simmer, kind of a thing. And I always thought that was fun because it made you pay attention then to it, the consumer. Hopefully, it was my goal, was it would make you pay attention to what I was saying, and that would help sort of bring more attention to kind of to the town in a weird way. So, I mean, to me, that's fun. I like history. I like going to new places, and I like traveling and things like that. So all this was self-serving as much as it was serving a purpose of, bring some attention to the town and trying to make something funny, and is also calling cards. As comics, we want to show that we're out there and we're traveling and we're working. Yeah. And it sounds funny, but showing being online on the various social media and all that, and showing people that you're working and that you're doing things, and hopefully at a high level, is important. That's how you get more work. That's how people, um, will randomly see what you're doing. And like I said, more attention and more clicks. I know I keep going back to it. That's how we get work.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
You ever think
it's
about
kind
doing
of a
that?
bummer.
You ever do that locally here? You ever thought about doing that? Because, like, for example, like Gastonia, I'm sure timing was an issue for you. For what maybe you probably didn't do that, but considering how it went for you that night, you ever think about, maybe I'm going to come back here. It's only down the, well, not down the road, but the next town
Sure.
over.
Totally.
I might do that here now because there's spots here that I've come across that I may find fascinating that I could probably share as I'm doing a gig later that evening. Anything like that would come to mind that you would do here?
Yeah, and
Especially in
I'm
Charlotte.
having a little bit of regret now that I didn't do it. But over the pandemic, I thought, I don't need to be going to a show. I can drive to Salisbury and do a fun Salisbury version of this on a day. There might not be a lot of people around. I might not get sort of the quick interviews. Every once in a while, I'd get interviews with people. But yeah, I mean, I haven't thought about it in a minute. But yeah, I thought about Monroe, Salisbury, Gastonia would be one for sure. Going up to like Statesville, there's plenty of places around here to do that. So I haven't done it, but I had thought about it in the past. I just never really pulled the trigger. I got lazy on the pandemic. That's what happens.
Do you still get nervous before you go on stage to do a set?
I don't get nervous. I think in the normal sort of definition of that. About 5 minutes before I go up, I get nervous excitement. That's what it is. It's not I'm afraid of the stage, or I get stage fright, nothing like that. It's more like, all right, here we go. We're going to do this. I think there's in all of performing of any kind, I think standing behind the curtain before you walk on stage is one of the most, that's where you feel the most alive, outside of actually being on stage. I think the anticipation of walking out there is the first time I ever did that was really in college. I took a Shakespeare class and we did a performance, and I remember that being so exhilarating, standing behind the curtain. And in a moment, I'm performing. I'm going to be standing out and just standing behind that curtain. And it was just absolutely crazy, exciting, and fun, and just your heart's beating out of your chest, and you're preparing. For me, it's always like, what's my first joke? That's always in my head. What's the first joke out there? And hopefully that doesn't change from where I'm standing behind the curtain to the microphone. It happens, but if something happens, you know what I mean, you have to bring it up. So
you mentioned something that it's not Shakespeare related, but as soon as you said Shakespeare, I don't know why I thought of this here, but I came across this on your channel. It was a commercial that you did. I can't remember what commercial it was, but it was you playing a leprechaun, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm bringing this up here because I'm curious about this with you, and so I'm bringing this up because for anyone who doesn't know, you're a short person, but I there's a part of that wondered if when they presented hey, listen, we want you audition, we want you for this part. I'm not sure if you auditioned for it or if someone just flat out gave it to you, but was there a little hesitation, like, I don't know if I want to do that, putting on an Irish accent and then playing a leprechaun in this this type of environment? I
mean,
or was it just like, hey, it's a gig and I could use the income, so therefore I'm going to take it? But I'm curious about what your thoughts on it was leading up to that here, and then once you've done it, has anything changed after the fact as well?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I mean, obviously my size is I'm 5 feet tall, for anyone who's wondering. It's definitely something that I had to come to terms with early on. So when behind the camera and as a writer early on, this isn't really something I thought about or worried about or whatever. Once I started getting on camera and especially on stage was, okay, this is something I'm going to maybe need to address. And one of the things I told John Schwert, I said, if we're going to make any jokes about my height, I want to be like Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny always won. He always won.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Even if he got his ass kicked, he still won. You know what I mean? And I told John, I was like, I got to give it as good as I take it. It can never be. I wasn't picked on. That's not how I grew up. I've got big brothers. I know how to, take care of myself. I'm a confident person, and with some horsepower upstairs. I don't That's not something I dealt with, and not something I have any interest in dealing with. So if I ever felt like there was a moment of being picked on, that just wouldn't fly at all. So making the decision for the Leprechaun for me was about, I want to get on camera and do some work and act. And this one I was like, I get to do a couple of these things, like put on. I see it trying to do what are they? It's not Irish, but it's anyway, whatever the term is. Sorry to all my Irish friends out there, but whatever that accent is called. I had no problem with that. I had to audition for it, and there was 8 other people, all sitting around the same room, and they called us each in, and we all went and rehearsed. So to me, I'm not insulted by it or anything like that. And it goes so far that it was a very successful lottery commercial is what it was for the North Carolina lottery. And it was fun. Everybody loved it. I know the agency loved it. And I think it was like 2 years later, they were going to be doing another one. And I'm totally talking out of school a little bit right now, but they, my agent had talked to this agency that was going to be producing it again. And they're not using short people to play that anymore, to play the leprechaun.
Leprechaun, right.
And it was like, why aren't you going to use that anymore? Now it's just regular people dressed up in like a leprechaun, but they're like 5'10" or whatever. And they were like, well, we don't want to be insulting to short people. So I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. So your goal was to not offend me by giving my job away to a taller person. I'm like, that's how you solved the problem, was to take work away from short people? What's the problem here? You know what I mean? And this isn't the lottery making this. This is like the production company was like, no, we don't really want to do that. We don't want to be insulting. I was like, all insulting. I don't give a shit. Pay me to be on camera again. That was fun. I had a great time doing it. It was very frustrating. This is just like another moment where people are like, no, we can't offend these people for this thing. And it's like, you're not offending me. It's not, I don't care. Some people are short. It's not a secret that I'm a short person.
Yeah.
I don't care. Give me short roles. Stop making short characters tall. I audition for roles for people who are taller than normal. Like they don't write them as short, and then I'll get that role because I bring something to the table, because as an actor, as a performer, I can bring something to it. So the idea of taking that away from me because I'm short doesn't make any sense. It's like, how about make it about merit? How about make the character that you wrote as who looks like this, and maybe they just happen to be a short person, but they're good at what they do, and then I get the job. How does that sound? You know what I mean? It seems so backwards to take that job away from short people because you're afraid of offending them. Like, I didn't complain.
Right. Well, I mean, but the thing is, though, and I'm curious to hear about your perspective on that. For a person such as yourself that says, "Look, I don't have a problem because, considering the reasons why you feel that way," but for someone else that is short as well, too, is like, "Well, I don't want us to be, I don't want to put it in quotes to be insulting, but be represented that way. We're more than just leprechauns, if you will." And I'm not trying to go down this this downward path here, but I'm curious about your perspective.
I have no problem talking about being short.
Okay.
And frankly, it's this idea of, I've heard it used a lot when they're talking about different groups with voting and stuff. I mean, are short people a monolith? Do we all have to have the same thought about this? It's like, I don't care. I kind of don't care what any other short people think. That we're not a demographic. Like, I'm a short guy. I don't give a shit about leprechauns. Leprechauns were around long before like all of these conversations. It's first of all, it's not a real thing. It's magic. It's you know what I mean? It's not if a little person chooses not to go and do that, that's totally fine within them, their decision, and I get it. I'm not a little person. I'm a very short person, and I'll take all the roles for short people. I've auditioned for roles for little people. What do I care? Is it a good role? Is it on a good project? Am I going to be treated well, make money, and further my career, and hopefully get a chance to be funny or dramatic or work with amazing people? That's all I care about. What this everyone's infatuation with, they don't want to offend people about body shape and all this other stuff. And it's like, here's what I think. I think everyone brings every person brings to the table their own opinions about short people, tall people, fat people, skinny people, whatever it is. And it's like, we're never going to change that. There's not anything that we're going to do that's going to make people look at me. People are going to have an opinion of me no matter what. It's kind of up to me to change that opinion if that's something that I want to do, or maybe just go about my life and not worry about what they think about it. I'll be very clear to say that I'm not in a position or in a group of people who is harmed because of how I look or have experienced historical, pains for it. You know what I mean? I'm just a short person saying I'm okay with being short. I'm not embarrassed by it. I feel no shame for it. I am very unique. My size has been more of a gift than a curse. You know, people remember me. It has shaped my personality, my relationship with my much larger brothers and family members has made me an incredibly unique person and has very, very much created who I am. So I don't have a problem with it at all. Talking about it, being it, whatever. I don't care.
There was a video, because it's funny because I was bringing this up here for a reason, but I happened to come across a video actually today of all days where it was a video of a guy, a Caucasian dude, who dressed up as I guess you could say, well, like a stereotypical Mexican, sombrero, poncho, long, the mustache.
I saw the video. I know what you're talking about.
You're talking about, right? So
I did too, yeah.
And it was interesting because I actually never looked at it me being Hispanic, I'm not Mexican, but it's one of those things where I think for me in time, I was one of those people, honestly, where I was like, I want, and I do. I'm not saying I don't, I do. But I think the representation that I'm looking more towards is more about, so this is my perspective here. I'm tired of seeing films of Hispanic, we went through the hardships, the struggles, and I've seen those stories before, and I've seen them in Hispanic films that weren't about race, but it was about the struggles of the cult.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that so many times as a kid, and even to some degree as an adult, that let's just move on to something else. If whoever's the best actor, let's get them for the part. And if they happen to be Hispanic, by all means, let's go for it. I don't care. But I always felt that if we're gonna make a film about race, what I really want to see is a film about how racist Hispanics, and I'm talking about my community, are really are, that it doesn't get delved into much, because racism is always associated with white people.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that racism is everywhere. I've seen it with my own eyes. But the point I'm getting is that if we want to make a movie about racism, let's talk about the racism in the Hispanic community, and let's talk about how brutal that is as well. Let's show that perspective,
right?
And then we'll get a new set of lens. And so then people say, "Oh, it's not just white people." Yeah, it's not just them. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are racist white people, but there are also racist Hispanics as well too. And if I want to see a film about racism, let's do one about Hispanics. That's my perspective.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting perspective. Yeah,
because it's something that I think I don't think it's a situation where I've noticed before in the past where, again, I am all for represent. I really do think that's a good thing. But after a while, I was talking to rather recently a psychologist by the name of Sarah Gaither, who's of a mixed background. And I wanted to get her perspective on what her thoughts on the way the representation is handled here with the various races and sexualities and whatnot. And it seems like, and I agree with what she was saying. Really, I would say the majority of it, because I have to look back and listen to the conversation again from what I can recall. But the problems are still the same with everybody, right? So Hispanics are dealing with racism. White people have, Irish people have dealt with racism as well too. So it seems like the problem is always consistently the same across the board. The only difference is obviously the culture and the language, but the problems are still there. Because I remember I was telling someone else as well too that I myself have had, when I sat at a Korean table, they literally one guy told me, "Hey, sorry, this is a table full just for Koreans only." I was like, "Oh, okay." So was that being discriminated? I don't know. I don't think so, but I was not welcome there.
Sure.
So when I saw that, I'll never forget that particular moment where I thought, so if they can do that to me, it's not exclusive to just one group of people.
Sure, right. Yeah.
So, and I think what's going on right now, again, this is my perspective, is that they're showing, let's show the hardships and the victory that comes out of those hardships. Fair enough.
Mhm.
But let's show the brutal side of like how racist people of color can be as well too here in this
Mhm.
country as well, because there are a lot of them in this country, many of which I know as well too.
Right, right.
And but I know for a fact that that's not something that's in the cards for Hollywood because that's not a hot ticket to sell.
Sure, right. Yeah, that would probably be it'd probably be a
You
hard
piss off
sell.
a lot of people, and a lot of people would
Yeah,
not
it's
want to
not a
work because no, I don't want to do this. With, well, you have grandparents that are like that. Yeah, yeah, they are, but I don't want them to make them look bad. I was like, oh, I don't give a shit. My grandparents aren't perfect either.
sure,
I
right.
want to share these stories. I'm not going to say it's them, but I will share these stories. But yeah, but you're going to you're going to make Hispanics look bad. Those are the facts.
Right, right.
And I think that's I'm not sure if we'll ever get to that point to share those realities.
Yeah.
But if you're, coming, listen to what you had to say about how you feel about your height and how you handle that for yourself. I think honestly, I'm going to be straight up. A lot of us, we've been through a lot, and you didn't go through that. The people before you went through that. You went
Mhm.
through a small
Right.
portion that lasted for X amount of time. I've talked to people who are actors as well too that were not Hispanic, that got Hispanic roles, that were Asians. Does that mean that
Right. Yeah,
they,
yeah,
or
yeah. I've heard that.
are
Yeah.
they portraying us in a negative light? No. So Lou Diamond Phillips is partially Filipino, if I recall correctly, and he played a Mexican American in La Bamba. And even the director's like,
Right.
Filipinos are the Hispanic Asians, so I don't have a problem with that. And I was like, well, if that guy says it's fine, so what's the real issue? You
Yeah,
know,
right, right. Yeah, I mean, I certainly this is, and some of my set, I don't really, I try not to
I know,
weigh in. It's been a thing where it's not, as a white guy, I certainly I want to listen more. I'll be an ally where I can, but I'm
right?
hearing what you're saying. It's a very interesting perspective, and sounds like a very honest perspective. And yeah, I mean, I applaud that. If that's something that that you think needs to be told, that's kind of enough sometimes. More,
Yeah,
it's more it goes back to storytelling. Let's hear the truth.
yeah. Well, the thing though that I was talking to Sarah about this here before about the because maybe you've heard this for yourself as well too, but I actually talked to somebody, an actor. I won't say that what the gender is because I don't want to give it away, but I've I've had them tell me that they were not going to be represented by an agency because they were white,
Mm.
and you know, and right now, representation is a thing, and we need to represent more people of color. So unfortunately for you, you're going to have to be pushed aside because we're going to look for the next
Yeah.
Hispanic or black person, whatever. Now, okay, I get that, but I was telling her that but in the long term, how is that going to look? Because it seems like,
Mm.
and I understand her perspective too. You know, people of your race have been through this, have gotten the upper hand. Now, just give the underdog the chance to get a chance to move forward with this here. And then Jordan Peele said, I want to hire only black leads in my films because I want to tell horror from that perspective, which made sense why he wanted to do that because black people in horror
Right.
films were always killed. And that's why I understood his perspective. Okay, that makes sense for me. I'm right or wrong. I don't think that's really the point. But then a white guy says, "Well, if I want to be in this movie, why won't he hire me? Because I can be a good actor as well too, dude. Just let him do what he wants." But yeah, but I think it's unfair for me. You know,
Yeah,
those are
there's
the people that I'm like, oh man, if we get more of
talking
that,
about yeah, they're talking about missing the point,
right?
right?
But that's the
It's
point
like
I'm getting at, though. But I think that's the overall issue that I think that because I mean I don't mean to go down this route here, but I pointed this out with you about your height because I was curious about your perspective on that. So I know we kind of went off on a tangent here, but it's interesting for me to hear you say that because it's like a very fine line of the whole you have to say the right things to appeal to everybody, and that's the
Mhm.
problem that I have the most, honestly,
Yeah.
where we want to tell a story about this, but we can't tell the story because we have to get the right actor for the part, but the right actor we need is for this part. So like when what's her name, Jennifer Lopez was cast as Selena back in '97. She's Puerto Rican, but the Hispanic community was pissed off. It's supposed to be a Mexican American. Why you had to hire Puerto Rican? And the film did well. People still
Yeah,
saw the
right.
movie anyway. So was it
Sure.
really her that's a problem, or was it just the fact that you wanted a Mexican American? I mean, what really was the issue there? I understand it, but the dollar spoke and people saw it that were
Yeah.
Mexican. A large community of Mexicans saw the film, and I think for the most part they liked it as well too. I did.
Sure.
So
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I think you said it from the beginning. Representation is definitely important. But when you can, when it makes sense, and sometimes it's representation may not happen when it should, and I think I tend to come back to it's usually on the individual, right? How do we take the information? How do we respond to the information? And how do we all be better about how we do all of those things? It's sort of we can only control what we can control as individuals in our small orbits, and that's how my charity works. That's how my attitudes are about the people around me and the people that I work with, and is to kind of keep my house as clean and as honest and as sort of truthful as possible, and I think that's the best a lot of us can do. Some of these questions and conversations get so big and so national and global, and not to say we can't have them or how important they are, but I think a lot of times, I think if we made our world a little smaller and took care of them, we all might be in a better place as a result of that.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and again, nothing against anything you said. Just for me, it's like, you're making great points, and there's a lot of really important conversations that are happening, and I do think that's good. But I think one of the best ways for us to do it is to take care of our own individual lives, relationships, responsibilities, culturally, socially, and all that stuff.
It's a very touchy thing. I know it can be taboo for a lot of people. I actually had one comedian tell me, I'm kind of really careful about talking about cancel culture because that's a real thing. And I was like, no, I get where you're coming from. Believe me, I do. I was, like I said before, I was very excited to speak with you. And a lot of it had to do with what I've come across with your videos on your YouTube channel, with the skits you've done, along with the the traveling shows you've done as well too on your channel. And I said to you before that, to me, that showed the storytelling that I thought you were really, really good at. That, I saw a piece of that with your comedy, and I'm not saying that your stand up didn't do it justice. It did, but where I felt like the most of your storytelling came the best out of is when it came through those narratives with the little 5-minute travel videos, along with the skits you've done as well too. That, to me, where I feel like that's where the most of that storytelling and the most of the ideas came out the best. And again, I hope it doesn't. I'm not trying to diminish your stand up here by saying
not
that.
At all. No, I appreciate it, man.
But and also hearing with your conversations as well too that I've come across in the past. There was also a side of me too that was quite surprised to see how collective you were as well, considering the amount of work that you do, the amount of hours you've worked, and then finding a way to be able to alleviate some of that workload to be able to focus on other areas that more or less is helping you with your creativity juices, if you will. And I always was interested to see where that all began to make that shift for you to be able to focus on those areas that would give the opportunity to work on those ideas you want to do along the way. So I find that to be rather fascinating. And if I hadn't gone to that show, without a doubt, I don't think I would have ever discovered you as a person. Have I not gone out to the Rooster on that Thursday night?
That worked out, man.
Well, I'm glad it did too, because there was a lot that I've actually taken away from you that really I'm looking forward to see what you're going to be doing down the line. And the fact you talk about looking and making a film as well too, I'm actually quite excited to see what that film is going to be that you're going to be working on, and hopefully will come to fruition for people to check out whenever it gets released, hopefully on YouTube, as you mentioned before. But I'm sure by the time this episode gets uploaded here, it'll probably be possibly this week, maybe next week. But I'm curious to see if there's anything you would like to more or less tell anybody out there about what they could be expecting down the line, as far as any upcoming stand-up shows you're going to be doing, or especially here in the area that they could be looking forward to if they are interested in checking you out.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. One thing too that I'm really excited about is so I'm the host of the Comedy Zone podcast. That's something that I do weekly, and we've really changed gears, and we're making that, not to promote another podcast on your podcast,
that's fine.
But we're doing a lot more sketches and really written sort of bits and things like that. That's a lot of fun. But along with that, I'm doing myself and Jonathan Williams, who's another comic in town. We have a scripted podcast coming out called Life Coach, that we're kind of finishing up the writing on that. So it'll be a comedy with a little bit of a drama in there, but it's mainly a comedy. So I'm excited about that to come out.
Is that
that'll
all
be on the
audio?
Queen City. Yeah, it'll be all audio.
Okay.
That's right. And for right now, we have some lofty goals with it, but right now, first thing we're doing is making it an audio podcast, and it's going to be at least 8, but probably 10 episodes with definitely some really, really amazing actors but we'll get to that down the road. So I'm very excited about that. It's called Life Coach, writing that. But as far as comedy shows coming up, I mean, I don't know if it'll be out by the 10th, but we have our graduation class will be at the Comedy Arts Theater of Charlotte on March 10th. So I teach a comedy class for people who want to try stand up, brand new people, and they're amazing, very, very exciting there. I have, what else do I have coming up? Boy, my April's huge. My May, my March has gotten a little small. I'm at Funny on the Fly tomorrow. But honestly, check out my website, jasonallenking.com. That's where my whole schedule is at. Follow me on YouTube. If you search Jason Allen King, a whole bunch of my stuff will pop up. So I think check that out. Follow me if you're on anything that's really important for us, comics and that. So yeah, man. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. The honor was mine. I appreciate you giving me a time and for us to have a more or less a really grounded conversation. So I really did appreciate that as well too. So
sure,
for the cameras, I'm going to say thank you very much. And I would love to do this again down the line with you. I think we just want to kind of touch the iceberg here. But yeah, anytime you have something you want to promote, if there's anything that I can help out, you let me know. I'd be happy to do so as well. But otherwise, for the cameras, I want to say thank you and cheers to you.